I think that's most people in now. Gosh, let's just take a minute, folks, and look at these fab people who've all come along to support the tour tonight. It's amazing.
Marvellous, yeah.
We are Mostly Ghostly Tours. We feel very proud to be here taking part in Castle Douglas Civic Week celebrations. Castle Douglas, we have a huge soft spot for it. It's a really important place to us, with personal connections over the years as well. So it's a real treat to be invited to take part in this. And I want to say a big thank you to Castle Douglas Civic Week team, without whom this would not be possible. And a special mention to Mr Drew Lowe for allowing us to sort of take over his shop for the night. And it really is just a wonderful place. We're delighted that you're all here. We value everyone who comes along to our tours. Without you good folks, we couldn't do what we love. And we very much love sharing history, sharing ghost stories, keeping the old tales alive, along with some more modern ones as well. And this tour is only about an hour tonight, but there's that much in Castle Douglas. Gosh, you could be here a lot longer. And the place that we're standing in tonight is, you know, integral part of Castle Douglas, the main street here. So many people will have come through here over the years. It was a real jewel in the crown of the street, I would go as far to say. And I know that my family used to enjoy coming in here. And since we're starting the tour here, it seems most fitting that we share a little bit of a whistle-stop history of Lowe's. So I'm going to hand over to John. This is not a spooky tale to start with, but it's a very important one. But please enjoy your night, and if there's anything at all you need, come and see us. We're your guides, we're here to look after you. But have fun, and I shall hand you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Well, here we are in John Lowe's, what used to be John Lowe's shop, newsagent in Castle Douglas. This is one of the oldest shops in Castle Douglas. We're going to go right back to the year 1900, when John Lowe opened a shop next door. He was there 25 years. Moved in here. It was a Phillips shoe shop, I think that's right, Drew. 1925, John bought this shop and moved in here. Painted the front green, became a newsagent, 1925. He ran the shop up until 1941, when sadly passed away. His son, also called John, took over the shop in 1941 and successfully ran it. Now in 1968, it was the first business in Scotland to have a postal service. In a sense, the post office got in touch with John Lowe, and they actually delivered the newspapers to people's houses. And it was so successful that they were shifting about 700 newspapers a day here. Now, John passed away in 1984, and Drew took over then, has been running the shop since then. Now, interestingly enough, the bus service, the Western buses, used to come here, and they would deliver all sorts of things from around Scotland, from Fries and further up. You'd have car exhaust, you'd have meat, everything would come in here. But one of the strangest stories of the lot was a bus from Ayr. It would actually deliver ashes from the crematorium to the shop, and some of you might realise what picked up by the families. So the actual last journey for some wasn't actually in a hearse, it was on the bus from Ayr to Castle Douglas. Now, the most popular newspaper, I don't know if it is today, but back then was the Galloway News. It was printed on a Friday. I don't think it is now. It's printed on a Friday then, it's a Thursday now. Often the printing press would break down, and Drew tells me there was queues right down King Street, waiting for the newspapers to be delivered on the wheelbarrow. And it would arrive, and Drew could hardly cut the string open, and people would be after the newspapers. But strangely enough, the ink on the newspapers wasn't quite dry, and people would be getting all their hands black. Now, that's just a few snippets. There was a Lendon library in here as well, in the shop. It was a real hub for people, and we know some people shed a few tears when it did close. It was a real important part of the community here in John Lowe. So there we are. Just a quick history of the shop here that we're standing in. It's a pleasure to be here, actually.
Well, it depends on your views, of course. There have been a couple of interesting things. Objects being displaced. I mean, it's a busy place, lots of things in here over the years, the postcards, the photos, the files. So maybe the odd thing might have gone amiss. But then looking in the place that you already have for something and finding that it is there, that is a little bit more unusual. But there's one particular favourite story that was told just last week. When Drew was looking for a photograph, and you can imagine there's a lot of things in here, you can see that for yourself, but this was a particular photograph that he was looking for. And he was searching for this photograph, and he just heard sort of behind him, the sort of sound of like something dropping onto the floor, just that sound. So of course it startled him because there was nobody else in the shop at that time. So he turned round and he looks down, and just imagine how he must have felt when he saw the very photograph that he was looking for sitting on the floor. So perhaps it was somebody lending a helpful hand. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but it's a lovely story anyway. Now, to give you a wee bit more, since we are in Castle Douglas, of course, to give a bit of an insight into the history of how Castle Douglas came about, to kind of set the scene, as it were, I'm going to hand over to Mary. We're going to do a couple of stories in here, and then we're going to move out into the street. So I'll hand you to Mary.
In ancient times, there's traces of prehistoric crannogs in Carlingford Loch. The town was developed by Sir William Douglas. He was born in 1745, and he went out to America to work, where he made his fortune. On returning to his homeland, he was in a position to buy the lands, which included the village of Carlingford, which was situated at the side of the loch, from the Gordon family. In 1791, discovering that the Gordons were in financial difficulties, he decided to help solve the problem by buying the lands, which cost only £1,400, which in those days was an incredible amount of money. Castle Douglas is grid planned, similar to the new town at Edinburgh. In 1791, the Borough of Barony granted a new town, allowing it to be run by a town council. The name Castle Douglas either derives from Shreve Castle or from the castle that Sir William Douglas built for himself near Gelson, a few miles from here. He was knighted in 1801 and chose for the Castle Douglas coat of arms a winged hart surrounded by a crown. This refers to the story of Sir James Douglas of Shreve Castle, who carried the hat of Robert the Bruce into battle during the wars of the Crusaders. Sir William Douglas set up a spinning cotton industry where Cotton Street gets its name from. Unfortunately, the business was unsuccessful due to the lack of water power for production and the lack of canal transport for the raw materials. Despite this failure, the town thrived and prospered long before the advent of the railway and the Wallet's Cattle Market, which opened up in 1856. I find Castle Douglas to be a lovely, friendly market town. I'm now going to tell you a wee story about the Douglas Mausoleum. It was built in 1820 for James Douglas, who was a brother of Sir William. It's reckoned to be the work of William Douglas from Orchardton, who worked alongside a William Douglas, who was a notable artist at that time. It's also possible it was designed by Walter Newell, a well-known architect who lived in Dumfries. His sketchbooks have similar mausoleum designs of that style. The mausoleum is a unique pyramid style situated in front of a woodland area. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to hand you over to Kathleen.
Quite a remarkable, imposing memorial, but what of the ghostly side? Well, to us, when you see like a place like that or an old graveyard, it's a place of peace, it's a place of respect, it's a place where the dead rest. However, being situated in amongst trees and looking as it does, of course, legends do arise from such a place. And a lovely lady got in touch with the team when we were researching this tour to tell us that she was brought up on Threave Estate, and as a young girl, she used to walk past there, and particularly when darkness was falling, she didn't just walk, she bolted to get past as quickly as possible. She recalls it looking quite imposing. There was lots of trees and bushes around it. It wasn't like it is today, ladies and gentlemen. It was quite different, and it had that really sort of spooky look about it, like something you would see in a film. So you could imagine it would feed a young imagination, yes. So she described that. She also told us that there was a lady without a head who is sometimes seen in that area. Apparently she carries her head in a basket, and I think the woman who got in touch with us was rather glad that she did not witness this curious lady firsthand. But we don't know what the story is behind her. She said that there probably weren't many people alive nowadays who knew it, but that she was seen in a kind of beach area near, is it the Fur Bar? Is that how it's pronounced, folks? The Fur Bar. And that the Fur Bar being a place where horses once stopped, a kind of coaching house. Horses' hooves have been heard there in the vicinity as well in more recent years. So even though it's not been used for a long time for that purpose, maybe there is still a part of the past that still exists, that certain people in certain circumstances are able to hear. Now, one last little tale about the mausoleum, and this did kind of get the tingles going up the spine. A friend of ours years ago, before we knew we were going to be doing this tour, contacted us. He is a photographer. He very much enjoys taking photographs of old historic buildings, beautiful buildings and graveyards, etc. And he one day visited the Douglas Mausoleum. It was a strange day. He kind of felt that all the while he was there, he felt someone else was quite close by. In the right-hand corner, he just sensed someone was there. It could have been a flesh and blood living person, but he kept looking round, fully expecting to see someone, but nobody appeared. He took a nice photograph. He wanted to get the scene just right. And if any of you have seen this place, you'll know there's the iron gates with the kind of spikes on the top. Well, he wanted to close the gates so that the spikes were in full view, get a really nice shot. Bit of difficulty he had shutting one of the gates. It seemed to be stuck for some reason. But eventually he got it closed and bolted it up. So it was nice and secure. He stood back, got a great photograph, and he jumped back into his car, had a quick look round, the gates were open. This was in the space of 20 seconds or less, he said. He particularly wanted to make the point that he'd had difficulty opening it. So how something had opened it again in that very short time, I do not have the answers. And with all our tours, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're not here to tell you that ghosts exist, but we're here to present to you some stories, and we hope that you will draw your own conclusions, and you might even have some to share yourselves. So we'll get out into the fray. Might not be wanting to get up now that So, yes, oh well, most of the stories are just kind of that. They're nothing to be frightened of, but it's a bit of a talking point. Oh. Now, as we were saying, we don't think the post office is haunted, but if anybody out there has got a story, do tell us. But we've just stopped here, there's a bit of room, because we wanted to mention a flat in King Street. Now, I'm not going to disclose the exact location, because you don't know, somebody might be living there. But there was a lady who got in touch with us to share an experience that her daughter had witnessed. Now, I don't know if that lady is with us tonight, but maybe she's not. However, the story that we received related to a very strange occurrence in this flat. Now, you've probably all heard stories about staying in places, for example, where objects move or maybe footsteps are heard, that kind of thing, senses of presence. Nothing too scary, just someone around. However, this flat is a little bit more eerie than that, because this young lass actually heard the scream of a young girl in her flat. Now, you could say, was that outside? Was that coming from the streets? Was somebody going about? All valid questions. But this person was utterly convinced that it was happening within the walls, and also reported the sound of footsteps coming up a stairwell, I believe, in that very flat. Now, there was another person who stayed there, I don't think at the same time, but this is the stuff out of films. This is where it gets really quite spooky. But don't worry, because we're not going there tonight. And this other lass was living there at one point, and she recalls actually going to the bathroom or going to a room that had a mirror in it. And doesn't it always happen when there's a mirror? And she looked in the mirror, but it wasn't like a strange reflection or anything like that, but it was her name written in lipstick, which would not be very comfortable to see. To my knowledge, she did not share the flat with anybody, and it would have been a pretty cruel joke, I think, to play on somebody. I wouldn't have liked that if it had happened to me. But make of it what you will. That is just a story that we received. Now, there was another lady who was sorry she couldn't be here tonight. She actually lives down south, but she had visited Castle Douglas recently. She went to an artist shop in the town, and when she went into this particular shop, she reported feeling strange. Just something, she couldn't put her finger on it. It was a sense of presence, and it was very cold. She got a really icy chill down her spine, accompanied by that horrible feeling, you know, when you get goosebumps and they just sort of come up all over, and you can't explain why they're there. Well, she felt it in the front of the shop, she felt it in the back of the shop. Either the presence was right through the store, or it was kind of following her around. She didn't say it was a really unpleasant feeling, it was just very, very unusual. And I said to her, you know, I asked her where it was, she couldn't remember exactly. She was only here as a visitor, but she said she'd love to come back to Castle Douglas, and you never know what you might experience. So that happened too, but what makes it very interesting for me personally is that was about 3-4 weeks ago when we were going through that really intense heat wave. Very unusual to start getting shivers and feeling cold when it's maybe 26, 27 degrees outside, although some of the shops will be shaded, and it is possible if you're maybe feeling a bit under the weather that you would feel odd. We always try to find the rational explanation first, but this lady was convinced there was something going on in that shop. So we are now going to head down to the crossing night. Now, I'm going to tell you a bit of a story about a shop that's not too far away from here. Now, some of you may remember when the Spar shop, as it once was, at Castle Douglas kind of hit the headlines of the local newspapers because there had been a sort of flurry of strange activity. We're going back now to 2010, so not that far ago away in the big scheme of things. And the Spar, or what it was, we'll just be walking past shortly, but this space here is connected, so that's why we wanted to stop here. Now, the staff were baffled. I don't know if anybody here has worked at the Spar shop or has any connections there. You've maybe heard some of the stories. But the staff were baffled because there had been some sort of curious events going on, things that they couldn't quite explain. One particularly notable incident took place when a door slammed unexpectedly open, hitting a wall, really frightening one of the girls who was working there. And I can see her point, it would give you a start. And she kind of dashed away from the scene. Then, of course, the famous CCTV footage came to light, and something had apparently manifested itself onto the video. Now, one of the people at the Spar told us at the time, it wasn't just things like this happening, doors opening, that kind of thing. Often when the staff, there was just two of them on duty, they would be working together, alone together in the shop, and they would hear doors in other parts of the shop. Now, they knew the shop well. They knew all the squeaks and creaks that you get in a building, but this was none of those. Occasionally, they would hear other noises that they just couldn't account for. Some more humorous things took place, for example, when a packet of toilet rolls flew off the shelf and onto the floor. So there was all sorts of things that might make you think someone was being a little bit mischievous. Now, mostly ghostly at that time were invited to come and look at the CCTV footage. Unfortunately, I didn't see it myself, but my colleague who was part of the team at that time came to visit Castle Douglas and had a look at it. Now, apparently in this footage there is a certain part of it where you see like the shape of a head and the shoulders, which looks like a child. So he looked at this footage and he said, well, I think I can see something there, but I can't be 100% sure what it is because it seems to be moving quite randomly. There's no pattern to it. Some of you who enjoy ghost stories and have maybe looked into the supernatural will know that some ghosts retrace their steps. So if they maybe followed a certain path around a house, for example, in life, they may continue to do so in death. It's almost like a replay of the past, like watching a recording, listening to a piece of music. It doesn't actually interact with you. However, this shape was very odd indeed, and they believed it was a little girl, and maybe they wanted to give her an identity, as people sometimes do. So they said it was a wee girl, so they were going to call her Jessica, which is rather a nice name. So Jessica was a kind sort of soul. There was nothing intentional, nothing intended to scare. They didn't think that for a minute. And that's where I'm thinking about the mischief, because maybe she just enjoyed having a wee bit of joke, having a little bit of fun. But either way, they caught something strange on their CCTV at the same point that door had flung itself open and the shop assistant had ran away. And as I say, who can blame her? Now, the old Bluebell, which of course wasn't situated far away from here, the Bluebell Hotel, a previous owner, a Mr. Holden, he was in the newspapers at that time giving his views on the mysterious happenings at the Spar shop. and he remembers quite vividly seeing shadowy figures in one of the closes next to the Bluebell. So might it have been around here, folks? Those shadowy figures were witnessed several times. The gentleman went to investigate because he didn't think it was a ghost. That wasn't his first thought. He just saw these figures. Nothing there. But it gets even more interesting when his hotel guests are also seeing them. People who don't know Castle Douglas. They've not heard the stories. They're visiting here for a night, 2 nights, maybe a week. And they're reporting seeing figures out in the Closeway. Others saw figures in the actual hotel itself, which is quite compelling. But they never actually found out the identity of them. They don't know who they were. Now, Mr. Holden reflected on his deeds of the hotel and discovered it dated back to 1715. So a lengthy history for sure. Lots of people staying there over the years, lots of things happening. All sorts of great characters, I'm sure. But did they maybe leave a trace? Did some of them refuse to leave the hotel? You just never know. He said that there was a church that occupied this area and an old burial ground, interestingly. And up until that point, a few years ago, I wasn't aware of that myself. And he wondered if all the disturbances over the years with the various buildings changing, did that maybe sort of disturb the peace, let's say, of some of the residents who had been here a lot longer? That is for you to decide. So when you're coming down this close again, or maybe having a wee look, just keep your eye open for shadowy figures. It won't be us.
It's a gem shop. It was built in 1885 and was a Victorian ladies' fashion at that time and was considered to be rather high-browed. The shop, which consists of arts and crafts, is renowned for its spooky happenings. Members of staff have experienced things they can't explain within the premises. One day, an assistant saw the apparition of a tall man with a moustache. She described him as being smartly dressed in a dark suit, and he had a top hat. The assistant said he was discovered in the wool department of the premises, which is on the ground floor. He said the man disappeared as quickly as he came. One morning, a former owner had a very intriguing experience while she was opening up. She caught a glimpse of a woman walking up the stairs. Thinking someone had come in, she went up to the first floor and looked around the premises, but there was nobody. Another day, around midday on a Thursday, the lady's son came in for a chat, as he did quite regularly. He suddenly caught a glimpse of a figure going up the stairs. He went up to investigate. All around, there was nobody to be seen. The lady witnessed is described as wearing a long brown coat with a hat. The owner said she seems to appear regularly on a Thursday around lunchtime, which seems rather odd. She also reported hearing a conversation with two women, although she was the only person in the shop, so how that happened, your guess is as good as mine. She made some inquiries, and after carrying out some research, she was told by a lady living in the town that during the war, a lady with her description used to come in regularly on a Thursday around midday to visit her sister, who was in charge of the underwear department. The lady, who I've just talked about, was engaged to be married during the war, but sadly her fiancé was killed. She went to live in London afterwards and died mysteriously. Another day, a man came in claiming to be a psychic. He came in along with his wife and children. And although he'd never been to Castle Douglas before, he told the shop owner, "You have got several ghosts in here." One night, The lady's daughter spent the night up in the attic where the sewing machines were kept. She had a rather terrifying experience. She woke up during the night with someone blowing cold air down her ear. She quickly got out of bed, ran out the shop. Absolutely terrified. That's an experience she will never forget.
Just a little bit touch on Threave Castle. You know Threave Castle, built on an island in the River Dee by Archibald the Grim in the 1370s. The stronghold of the Douglas clan, one of the most powerful clans in the whole of Scotland. And wasn't Threave Castle a fortress? The Douglases had many lands and many castles, but Threave was the main stronghold. And King James II of Scotland wasn't happy with the power the Douglases had, and he laid siege on all their castles, and one by one they all fell, till all that was left was Threave. Well, King James set up Tongland Abbey, and the royal forces arrived on the banks next to Threave. 2.5 months siege took place. They couldn't break it down. Only when a large siege cannon came down from Linlithgow Palace did they stand a chance. This cannon was called Mons Meg, was nicknamed Mons Meg. That broke through the castle walls. The first shot shook everybody inside the castle. The second one took the castle. So, potted history of Threave Castle, ladies and gentlemen.
Associated with it. It had a particular feature, folks, which it still does today, the gallows knob. And the clue is in the name, but for anybody who's not sure, that's where people would be hanged. And probably unjustly a lot of the time, some of these souls wouldn't have done anything much wrong, but if you got on the wrong side of the Douglases, you were in serious trouble. They were not a clan to be messed with. And the gallows knob, they used to boast, the family actually boasted that it was never without a tassel. So it wasn't long in between people before another soul was hanging up there. So it's witnessed the dark past. It has got ghostly happenings associated with it, which won't surprise you given its history. But people have heard whispered voices there on numerous occasions. So you can imagine investigating this wonderful 5-storey fortress, exploring round about and maybe coming into a wee dark corner, and all of a sudden you hear a whisper and you wonder if it's the person that you were with, and then you realise quite soon that there is nobody else but yourself. So it has whispered voices. Other people have felt presences, cold spots, the kind of things you would link with a ghost. But whether it is a ghost, whether it is the imagination, or just that wonderful evocative location that seems to get the imaginations going, we can't be sure. But if anywhere's haunted round here, surely, folks, it has to be Threave Castle. Now,
just remember, what made Threave such a great fortress, if you like, was when the 8th Earl Douglas, William Douglas, he actually constructed an artillery house.
Yes.
The ground floor was like most tower houses and castles at the time. You had the reception area, the kitchen and the prison. The first floor, the grand hall where the banquets and everything else would take place. The second floor was a private apartment. It was this third floor which set it apart and how it could withstand most siege, even by a determined army. How it worked was there was a doorway where artillery and other things could be winched up on the third floor, taken in. There was 9 windows.
Right, folks. How are you getting on, Josh? Are you enjoying yourself? Hope you're enjoying the history. See, some wee girls are away there having fun. I think we've lost a couple. Maybe the park wasn't the best idea. No, only kidding. Now, folks, Dumfries and Galloway can lay claim to one of the most, well, we would like to think it is the most haunted road in Scotland, and it certainly lives up to its reputation. But the A75 stretches 100 miles from Gretna in the east to Stranraer in the west, and there is one particular part of the road that is very active indeed. White ladies have been seen, monks, strange creatures, all sorts of things, even a pair of legs. However, that's away in the east, that's at the Kinmount Strait, which some of you will know. But to bring it a lot closer to home, because we're talking about the Castle Douglas area tonight, there has been a very curious sighting witnessed just on the outskirts of Castle Douglas, something that we have certainly not come across before. So let's take you back in time now to when the circus actually came to town in Castle Douglas, and for that I'll hand to you.
Thank you, Kath. Came into Castle Douglas station. It had a huge African elephant with it. Nevertheless, the parade went down Cotton Street to the site. Now I don't know where the site is in Castle Douglas, I'm trying to find out. So it was because they were wondered why they would come down Cotton Street. Thank you for that. I thought it must have been that way. They wouldn't cross the road twice. Now, it's a hot day. On the way down, this huge African elephant took ill. Later on that day, the elephant died, which was unfortunate. Now, the circus, of course, had to get rid of the carcass somehow. So they made some inquiries and got in touch with a local farmer, and he got some family and friends, and they dug a hole in a field, in the middle of a field, on the outskirts of Castle Douglas, close to where the A75 is. All day long they spent digging this hole with put lime in and everything else. Later on that evening, a circus lorry arrived, brought the elephant and tipped it into the hole. Then it was all covered up, lime, so it was flat. It was kept a secret. Nobody had to say anything about this elephant. Now the circus promised the men they would get £5 and they all received the £5. End of story? Not quite. Very few people knew about what had happened. Now, over the years, people have said that they have seen a large animal by the side of the A75. But not only that, they haven't just seen it, they've heard moaning noises as well. Just imagine that. I don't know if anybody hears. On the outskirts, where it is, on the outskirts of Dumfries. On the outskirts of Castle Douglas. Thank you, Kathleen. Kathleen always keeps me right. On the outskirts of Castle Douglas. Heard a moaning noise or seen anything. So that's a story with a difference. That's one we didn't expect.
It's a very serene setting, a place where you would maybe spend the afternoon having a picnic beside the swans. However, in stormy nights, strange things have been heard. So what is the story about? Well, local legend says that many years ago, the town was drowned below the waters of Carnlough Loch. Once upon a time, there was 2 chapels, one on each island. The story goes that on very dry seasons, the roofs of the chapels can be seen lurking from above the loch. On wild winter stormy nights, residents living at Carlingworth Hill could hear the eerie sounds of the toll of the bells lurking beneath the waters. Oh, goodness.
It's a bit stormy, a bit windy, a bit rainy, and you hear some strange music coming from the loch. It might be the Droon Tune, a bit of a legend, but you just never know. It's a beautiful loch, certainly. The moon is out tonight. It couldn't have been a more lovely start to our evening. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming to our spooky storytelling stroll. If anybody has any questions or would like to get in touch with us afterwards, you can contact us through our website, mostlyghostly.org, or through Facebook, or by calling us. We would love to hear your feedback, your stories. We just hope you've enjoyed yourself as much as us, because we've had a fab time. And John, you were going to thank... is that the bell? Is that the... That was not planned, I have to say. We've maybe got some young volunteers over there who can come on the next tour. But John, you were going to thank, was it the Galloway Glens Landscape? They've sponsored it. Yeah, they've sponsored it.
A free evening for everyone, so I'd like everyone to thank Mostly Ghostly. And
thank you guys as well. Thank you, folks. Thank you. It's been lovely.